Warning! Before we start tonight's episode, a quick reminder. This conversation is about culture, not individuals. We're looking at patterns, habits, and the systems shaping how we live, not pointing fingers at any one person listening. If something we discuss sounds familiar or a little uncomfortable, that's kind of the point. Culture checks are meant to make us think, maybe even laugh at ourselves a little. This isn't about shaming people for enjoying modern life. Technology, convenience, and self-expression all have value. But every shift comes with trade-offs, and ignoring those trade-offs doesn't make them disappear. So tonight we're asking questions, not handing down verdicts. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and remember, the goal isn't outrage, it's awareness.
Have you ever noticed how everything feels like it's being performed now? Not just online, everywhere. Someone's filming their workout. Someone's recording their reaction to something. Someone's narrating their life into a phone like they're the star of a documentary nobody asked for. It's like we crossed some invisible line where living quietly stopped being enough and suddenly every moment needed an audience. And I'm not even saying that to judge it, because we all participate in it to some degree. Social media gave everyone a microphone, a camera, and a stage. That's powerful. It opened doors for creativity, connection, and opportunity that never existed before. But it also did something else. It turned ordinary life into potential content. Dinner isn't just dinner, it's a post. A workout isn't just exercise, it's a clip. A moment isn't just a moment anymore, it's something to capture, edit, and share. So tonight we're asking a simple question, but it's a big one. Are we documenting our lives or replacing them? This is Friday's Culture Check. And tonight we're asking, are we losing the plot? Let's bring in the crew. All right, let's bring in the crew, because if we're going to figure out whether modern life has turned into one giant reality show, we're going to need a full panel for this one. It's Friday, which means the conversations get a little looser, the observations get a little sharper, and the goal isn't to win an argument, it's to figure out what the hell is actually going on around us. First up is Brian. If there's a cultural shift that smells like ego, laziness, or people forgetting how real life works, he's going to call it out. Brian brings that Friday MAGA fire energy, but tonight it's aimed squarely at what he calls main character syndrome. The idea that everyone thinks they're the star of their own movie, while discipline, humility, and responsibility slowly fade into the background. Rachel's here as well, the steady voice when things start flying off the rails. When the takes get too extreme or the arguments start drifting into caricature, she's the one who brings things back to reality. Rachel looks at the data, the psychology, the nuance behind the trends, and reminds us that most cultural shifts aren't as simple as blaming one side or the other. Daniel is in the building, which means if there's a pattern, he's looking for the system behind it. Algorithms, incentives, attention economies. Daniel's always asking who benefits and why the behavior keeps repeating. He's not saying there's a grand conspiracy, but he's definitely saying these platforms didn't accidentally turn life into content. And Skylar is back with the progressive lens that keeps the conversation honest. She's not afraid to challenge the nostalgia or push back when the discussion starts sounding like everything used to be better. Skylar brings the perspective that some of these shifts, self-expression, independence, breaking old norms, might not be decline at all, but evolution. And then there's me. I'm not here to referee. I'm here to ask the uncomfortable questions and keep the conversation moving. Because sometimes culture changes so gradually that we don't notice until it's everywhere. It's Friday and it's Culture Check, and let's get into it. All right, let's start here. Scroll through social media for 5 minutes and you'll see it everywhere. Someone filming their reaction to something, someone narrating their day, someone turning a normal moment, grocery shopping, a workout, eating lunch, into content. And again, I'm not saying that like it's evil. Technology made it possible for everyone to share their voice, build a platform, even build a business. But it also feels like something else happened along the way. Somewhere between smartphones and social media, everyday life started turning into a stage. Instead of experiencing moments, people are recording them. Instead of conversations, people are creating clips. Instead of living first and documenting later, the documentation comes first. And I keep wondering, did we accidentally create a culture where everyone feels like the main character? Not in the healthy sense of taking responsibility for your life. I mean the sense where everything becomes a performance for an audience. So let's start there. Rachel, I'll begin with you. Are people becoming more narcissistic, or are we just living inside systems that reward attention so strongly that everyone starts acting like the center of the story?
I think the word narcissism gets thrown around too easily. What we're seeing is less about personality disorders and more about incentives. When platforms reward visibility, likes, shares, comments, followers, people naturally adapt their behavior to what gets attention. It's not always ego driving it. Sometimes it's simply learning the rules of the environment. And the environment we live in now constantly reinforces the idea that visibility equals value. If something isn't shared, it almost feels like it didn't happen. People curate moments not necessarily because they think they're the center of the universe, but because culture has trained us to treat documentation as participation. The danger isn't narcissism so much as distortion, when the performance of life starts replacing the experience of life.
That's interesting because what you're describing isn't people suddenly becoming self obsessed. It's people adapting to a system where attention is the currency. And when attention becomes currency, behavior shifts. People naturally lean toward whatever gets rewarded. But here's where some folks start getting frustrated. When everything becomes performance, authenticity starts to feel rare. Moments that used to be private, helping someone, having dinner, working hard quietly, and now feel incomplete unless they're broadcast. Brian, let me bring you in here. Is this just modern technology doing what technology does? Or are we raising a generation that thinks life is a constant audition?
Look, I think Rachel's right about the incentives, but at some point you've still got to choose how you live. Technology didn't force people to turn every moment into content. Somewhere along the way, we started rewarding attention more than substance. And once that happened, people realized they could get validation without actually building anything meaningful. You used to earn recognition through accomplishment. Now, sometimes it feels like people are chasing recognition first and hoping accomplishment shows up later. That's where the main character syndrome feeling comes from. Everyone's narrating their story like they're the star of a show, but real life isn't scripted. Real life is boring sometimes. Real life is quiet work nobody applauds. And I think a lot of people miss that. When every moment becomes performative, humility disappears. Discipline disappears. The idea that you can just live a normal life without documenting it starts to feel almost outdated.
That line about quiet work is interesting because historically, most meaningful things happened without an audience. Families built lives without broadcasting it. People developed skills without posting every step of the process. Achievement used to come first, recognition later, if it came at all. But the other side of this conversation is expression. A lot of people would argue that platforms simply gave voices to people who didn't have them before. Skylar, let me bring you in. Is this main character syndrome? Or is it just a new form of self expression that older generations are struggling to understand?
I think some of it is definitely generational misunderstanding. Younger people grew up in an environment where documenting life is normal. Sharing experiences online isn't always about ego, it's about community. People connect through storytelling, humor, vulnerability, creativity. That's not inherently narcissistic. Where it becomes problematic is when the pressure to perform replaces authenticity. When every moment feels like it has to be interesting, aesthetic, or entertaining enough to share, people start editing their lives in real time. That can create unrealistic expectations, comparison, and a constant sense of being watched, even when nobody's actually watching. But I wouldn't frame it as decline. I'd frame it as growing pains. We're the first generations navigating life with permanent digital mirrors. Of course, it's messy. The question isn't whether people share too much. It's whether we're learning how to balance visibility with real presence.
That idea of a digital mirror is interesting because mirrors change behavior. When you know you're being seen, even potentially seen, you act differently. That doesn't automatically make people fake, but it does mean the environment shapes the behavior. Daniel, let's connect the dots here. Is this just human nature meeting new tools, or are the platforms themselves designed in a way that nudges people toward constant self-performance?
It's definitely human nature meeting new tools. But those tools are not neutral. Platforms are built around engagement, and engagement grows when people center themselves in the narrative. The more personal, dramatic, or emotional the content feels, the more it travels. So the system naturally rewards behavior where the creator becomes the story. Think about how the algorithms work. A quiet video of someone reading a book rarely spreads. A video where someone narrates their entire day, shares a personal struggle, or reacts dramatically to something That spreads faster because viewers feel pulled into a story, and stories almost always need a main character. So, over time, people learn, consciously or not, that framing themselves as the center of the narrative increases attention. It's not necessarily narcissism, it's adaptation to incentives. The system subtly teaches people how to perform their lives in ways that keep the audience watching. The problem is that once performance becomes normal, authenticity gets harder to recognize. If everything is edited, narrated, and filtered, the line between life and content starts to blur.
And maybe that's the real tension in all of this. Technology gave us incredible tools to connect, create, and share stories. But those same tools also change the environment we live in. When attention becomes currency, performance becomes tempting. When performance becomes normal, quiet authenticity starts to feel unusual. That doesn't mean people are worse than they used to be. It just means the stage got bigger. And maybe the real culture check question isn't, are people narcissistic? Maybe it's, are we remembering to live the story or just narrate it? All right, let's pause for a quick break before we move into the next part of tonight's culture check, because the next question might be even bigger. If everything is becoming easier, faster, and more convenient, so are we accidentally making ourselves weaker?
Tonight's episode is brought to you by Livestream, the revolutionary app designed to make sure you never experience a single moment privately ever again. Going for a walk? Stream it. Making coffee? Stream it. Having a deep personal conversation? Definitely stream that. With Livestream, every ordinary moment becomes potential content for your followers because let's face it, if it's not recorded, filtered, captioned, and uploaded within 30 seconds, did it even happen? Our advanced algorithm automatically suggests dramatic titles for your life. Moments like, "You won't believe what happened at the grocery store," "Emotional day in my life," "My honest thoughts about breathing." And for our premium users, Livestream Pro includes auto-generated inspirational captions, real-time comment alerts from strangers who know nothing about you, and a built-in reminder that if engagement drops, you might need to cry on camera. Livestream trademark, because living your life is good, but content is forever.
All right, joking aside, let's shift gears. Because while we've been talking about attention and performance, there's another side to modern life that's changing just as fast. Everything is getting easier. Food delivery, one-click shopping, GPS for everywhere, AI writing emails, messages, they even thinking through problems for us, which raises the next culture check question. Are we becoming more efficient or just more dependent? And think about how different daily life is compared to even 20 years ago. You don't need to cook if you don't want to. Food shows up at your door. You don't need to navigate. GPS tells you every turn. You don't even need to remember phone numbers anymore. And now AI is writing emails, texts, essays, even helping people think through arguments. Convenience is incredible. It saves time, reduces friction, and makes life smoother in ways previous generations couldn't imagine. But friction also used to build capability. You learned directions because you had to. You developed patience because things took longer. You figured things out because there wasn't always a shortcut. So here's the question. Brian, I'll start with you. Has modern convenience made life better? Or has it quietly made us softer?
Look, convenience itself isn't the enemy. Nobody's saying we should go back to churning butter in the backyard. But when every challenge gets replaced with a shortcut, people slowly lose the muscles that challenge used to build. Discipline, patience, problem solving. Those things develop when life pushes back a little. If every inconvenience disappears, those skills start to fade. And you can see it in everyday life. People panic when GPS drops signal because they never learned how to read a map. Someone waits 5 minutes for food and suddenly it's a crisis. That's not because people are bad. It's because we've removed friction from the system. Friction used to train resilience. Now everything is optimized for comfort, and comfort doesn't build much character. So yeah, convenience made life easier. But if you never challenge yourself outside of that comfort bubble, you start depending on systems to function instead of building the ability to function without them.
That point about friction is interesting because historically, a lot of skills developed simply because there were no alternatives. You figured things out because you had to. Now the option to bypass the struggle is always right there in your pocket. But convenience also opens doors. It gives people access to tools and information that used to be locked behind time, geography, or money. Skylar, let me bring you in here. Is convenience making people softer, or is it just making life more accessible and efficient for Evie Ryan?
I think we sometimes romanticize the past a little too much. Yes, friction can build resilience, but a lot of that friction also came from barriers that made life unnecessarily hard for people. Convenience and technology have opened doors for accessibility for people with disabilities, for parents juggling work and childcare, for anyone who doesn't have endless time or resources. Being able to order groceries or navigate a new city with GPS isn't weakness, it's efficiency. Where I do think Brian has a point is when convenience becomes the default for everything. When every challenge gets removed, we don't always develop the skills we might need later. The key difference is choice. Technology should be a tool that expands what people can do, not something that replaces their ability to do it. So the issue isn't convenience itself, it's whether we still practice the skills underneath it. If we rely on systems without maintaining the human capability behind them, that's when dependency starts creeping in.
That balance between tool and dependency might be the real tension here, because technology is amazing when it expands what we can do, but it becomes risky when we stop remembering how to do things without it. And the funny part is, most people don't notice that shift happening. It's gradual, one small shortcut here, another there, until suddenly the system is doing half the thinking for us. Daniel, let me bring you in here. Is this just the natural evolution of technology? Or are we quietly outsourcing more of our thinking and decision making than we realize?
I think outsourcing is the right word. Humans have always outsourced certain tasks to tools, calculators, maps, computers. But the difference now is scale. We're no longer just outsourcing physical effort or simple calculations. We're starting to outsource judgment, memory, and even creativity. Think about it. GPS doesn't just give directions, it replaces spatial awareness. Recommendation algorithms don't just suggest things, they shape taste. AI tools don't just assist writing, they sometimes replace the thinking that used to happen before the writing. None of those tools are inherently bad, but they slowly change the role humans play in their own decisions. The real shift is subtle. When tools become predictive, they begin nudging behavior. When behavior gets nudged often enough, it becomes habit, and habits eventually reshape capability. So the question isn't whether technology is evolving, it obviously is. The question is whether we're consciously deciding which capabilities we keep and which ones we're comfortable letting machines handle.
That's a powerful way to frame it, deciding which capabilities we keep. Because tools are supposed to expand human ability, not quietly replace it. If GPS helps you travel farther, that's great. But if it means you can't find your way across your own neighborhood without a screen, something changed. Same thing with AI. It can be an incredible assistant. But if we stop thinking critically because the machine can generate an answer faster, that's a trade-off we probably didn't fully think through. Rachel, let me bring you in to ground this. Is this just the normal evolution of tools helping humanity? Or is there a point where convenience starts costing us something important?
I think the answer is both. Tools have always changed how humans operate, and most of those changes ultimately made life better. We no longer have to memorize entire libraries of information because knowledge is accessible. We don't have to spend hours navigating unfamiliar places because technology can guide us. In many ways, that frees up time and energy for more meaningful work. But the trade-off becomes a problem when convenience replaces engagement entirely. If every task becomes automated, people stop practicing the underlying skills: critical thinking, memory, patience, even basic problem solving. Those abilities develop through use. When tools do everything for us, we risk letting those muscles weaken. The real issue isn't the technology, it's intentionality. The healthiest approach is learning how to use these tools without letting them define our capabilities. Technology should support human judgment, not substitute for it. If we stay aware of that balance, convenience can improve life without quietly eroding the skills that make us capable.
That word again, intentionality. That seems to be the thread running through tonight's entire conversation. Technology isn't the villain. Convenience isn't the villain. Attention isn't even the villain. The real risk is drifting into systems without realizing how they're shaping us. Because when everything gets faster, easier, and more automated, it's easy to assume progress is happening automatically too. But progress still requires effort. It still requires thinking. It still requires deciding which parts of life we want machines to handle and which parts we want to keep human. So maybe the culture check question tonight isn't, are we getting weaker? Maybe it's, are we staying aware? All right, it's Friday. Let's loosen this up a little. It's time for the lightning round. 3 quick cultural moments that make you stop and go, wait, this is normal now? All right, we've talked about attention, performance, convenience, technology, and whether modern life is quietly rewiring us. But now it's Friday, which means it's time to lighten things up a little. This is the Culture Check lightning round. 3 cultural moments that make you pause and think, wait, when did this become normal? No long speeches, no overthinking, just quick reactions at 3 topics. Everyone gets a swing. Let's see where this goes. Filming strangers for content. First one. Everywhere you go now, gyms, grocery stores, airports, someone's filming something. And a lot of times they're filming other people who never agreed to be part of the video. Then the clip ends up online for millions of strangers to judge. So here's the question. When did filming strangers become normal? Skylar, start us off.
I think this is one of the darker sides of the attention economy. When content becomes currency, people start looking for moments that will generate reactions. And unfortunately, strangers in public become easy targets. Sometimes it's harmless, but other times it turns people into characters in someone else's narrative without their consent. That's where it starts crossing ethical lines.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that trend at all. There's a difference between documenting your life and turning random people into props for internet attention. Some things should stay private. If someone's at the gym or the grocery store, they shouldn't have to wonder if they're about to become someone else's viral moment.
And again, the incentives explain the behavior. Videos that spark outrage or embarrassment tend to travel farther online. So the system quietly encourages creators to capture moments that provoke reaction. It's not necessarily malicious every time. It's behavioral reinforcement at scale.
It also raises questions about boundaries. Public space doesn't mean unlimited access to someone's personal moment. As technology makes recording easier, society has to renegotiate what respect and consent look like in shared spaces.
Everyone is a life coach. Round 2. Scroll long enough and you'll eventually see someone explaining how to fix your life, optimize your mindset, and achieve success, usually while standing in front of a rented Lamborghini. When did everyone become a life coach? Brian, go.
Look, some people genuinely want to help others, but there's also a lot of performance going on. Advice used to come from experience. People who had built something over decades. Now, sometimes it feels like people are giving motivational speeches before they've actually lived the story.
At the same time, people are hungry for guidance. Traditional mentorship structures, churches, civic groups, community leaders have weakened. So people turn to the internet for direction. The problem isn't that advice exists online, it's that credibility can be hard to judge.
And again, the platforms reward authority signals. If someone speaks confidently, presents a clear narrative, and posts consistently, the algorithm boosts it. Over time, confidence becomes indistinguishable from expertise for a lot of viewers.
Which makes discernment incredibly important. Advice can be valuable, but people still need critical thinking. Just because someone speaks confidently doesn't mean they have the experience to back it up.
AI writing our messages. Final round. AI tools can now write emails, texts, essays, even dating messages. Some people are literally having conversations online where neither side wrote the message themselves. So here's the culture check question. If AI writes our words, are we still communicating? Daniel, start us off.
AI is becoming a mediator of communication. Instead of expressing thoughts directly, people increasingly ask a system to refine or generate the message. That can be helpful for clarity, but it also adds a layer between intention and expression. The risk is that communication becomes optimized rather than authentic.
I'm all for tools that help people work faster, but if AI is writing your texts, your emails, and your dating messages, at some point you've got to ask who's actually in the conversation. Relationships are built on real communication, not auto-generated personality.
I think the technology can be helpful in certain contexts, like helping people articulate thoughts they struggle to express, but if it replaces genuine voice entirely, it risks making communication feel artificial. The human element still matters.
Exactly. Tools should support expression, not replace it. If AI helps someone organize their thoughts, that's useful. But meaningful communication still requires authenticity. Without that, conversations lose depth.
And there it is, 3 moments that somehow became normal without anyone officially voting on them. Filming strangers, instant life coaches, AI writing our conversations. None of it is automatically bad. But every one of those trends asks the same question. Are we still steering the culture or just adapting to whatever the system rewards? All right, before we close this out tonight, let's take a quick look at the merch.
All right, before we wrap this thing up tonight, quick reminder. If you like the conversations we're building here on Data and Dissonance, you can actually support the show and represent the brand at the same time. The Data and Dissonance merch store is live. We've got hoodies, tees, trucker hats, bumper stickers, mugs, all built around the same idea this show stands for. Independent thinking, real conversation, and not letting the noise of the world do all the thinking for you. And of course, we've got the 3 signature coffee blends. High Lakes, the light roast, Rock Creek, the medium, Bitterroot, the dark French roast, strong enough to survive any news cycle. If you want to support the show and grab something cool at the same time, head over to data-and-dissonance at printify.me/dot. Wear it, drink it, stick it on your truck. All right, let's close this one out.
You know, the thing that stands out to me about tonight's conversation isn't that the world is falling apart. It's that the world is changing faster than we've really stopped to think about. Most of the trends we talked about tonight, filming everything, convenience everywhere, AI writing our messages, strangers becoming content, none of those things happened overnight. They crept in slowly, one feature at a time, one update at a time, one new habit at a time. And because each step felt small, we adapted without really asking what those adaptations might mean long term. But that's the interesting part about culture. Culture isn't something that just happens to us from above. It's something we participate in every single day. Every time we decide how we spend our attention, what we reward, what we share, what we ignore, we're quietly shaping the environment around us. The platforms might set the stage, but people still decide what becomes normal. And I think that's the real takeaway from tonight's Culture Check. Technology isn't the enemy. Convenience isn't the enemy. Progress isn't the enemy. The real risk is drifting through change without intention. When we stop asking questions about the systems around us, those systems start making decisions for us. Not maliciously, not dramatically, just gradually. But the flip side of that is hopeful. Because if culture can drift, it can also recalibrate. People can choose depth over noise, real conversations over performance, presence over constant documentation. None of those choices require rejecting modern life. They just require remembering that human judgment still matters inside a digital world. So maybe the real question tonight wasn't whether society is losing the plot. Maybe the question is whether we're paying attention to the story we're helping write. That's this week's Culture Check. We'll see you next time. Remember to speak truth. Stir thought.
Tonight's episode of Data and Dissonance is brought to you by the stories and the sound behind this platform. If you enjoy the kinds of conversations we have here, questions about truth, conviction, power, culture, and standing firm when the pressure builds, you'll want to check out the Caleb Rourke thriller series. It starts with The Covenant Protocol, followed by The Prophet Directive, and the upcoming 3rd installment, Black Echo Rising. These aren't just action thrillers. They explore the same ideas we talk about here on the show: courage, faith, loyalty, corruption, and what it means to hold the line when the world around you starts shifting. Fast-paced stories, layered characters, and a fight for truth in a world where truth isn't always convenient. You can grab the series right now on Amazon. The link is in the show notes. And if music is more your lane for the drive home or the long road ahead, check out the Data and Dissonance music releases now streaming everywhere. The album Uncaged, raw, reflective, and unapologetic. The country-rooted album Four Wheelers and Hallelujah, Faith, Freedom, and American Grit. And the single Stand Tall Charlie, a tribute to conviction and backbone in a culture that sometimes forgets both. Books for the mind, music for the road, conversations for the culture. We'll see you next episode.